Hi, everybody. Al Bernstein here with another one of my quick hits. And on this one, I'm going to get a chance to reflect on the folks who are being inducted into the International Boxing Hall of Fame this coming year. It is a group that I have a very special connection with on many levels. It's a very talented and deserving group that will go in June 8th through 11th. In the induction ceremonies that are so special up in Canastota, New York. Now, as I mentioned, with just about everybody on this list, I have a very, very personal connection. It starts with the fighters who are being inducted. Evander, the real deal Holyfield, former cruiserweight and heavyweight champion, is among the inductees. And Evander and I go way, way back. I announced so many of his fights. I in fact, did the play-by-play when he won the title, the heavyweight title, from Buster Douglas. It was a seminal moment in his career, and it was a joy to call that fight. And I was also there in a time of disappointment for Evander Holyfield, and it provided one of the most poignant moments I've had in the sport of boxing. Holyfield was fighting Riddick Bowe and fought a valiant, courageous fight. But of course, he lost that first fight and took a lot of punishment. And he went to the dressing room. We didn't get to interview him in the ring. They allowed me to go to the dressing room, and he was on the floor sitting with his back against the wall. And I literally got down there with him to do the interview. And it was, he was honest and heartfelt in the comments he made. And I remember at that moment, you felt very much like you were sharing the disappointment that he had at that moment. But there were much more success than disappointment for Evander Holyfield during his whole career. And I always felt that Evander Holyfield was one of the most exciting fighters that ever laced on a pair of gloves. He was an offensive machine who at his best was a brilliant combination puncher, had pop in his punch. He wasn't a one-punch knockout artist, but he could certainly punch, and had an astonishing career. And it came in several parts, really three parts. The cruiserweight part, the first part is heavyweight champion, and then his resurrection when he beat Mike Tyson in that memorable match. So Evander Holyfield goes into the Hall of Fame. No one could possibly deserve this more. A man who was in perhaps the best trilogy that has ever been provided to the sport, Marco Antonio Barrera, inducted this year. And Marco was part of what I call a group of fighters that rival the Four Kings, that rival Tommy Hearns, Marvin Hagler, Roberto Duran, and Ray Leonard in terms of their competition with each other. Marco Antonio Barrera, Juan Manuel Marquez, Manny Pacquiao, and Eric Morales. The four of them engaged in series of fights that, in my opinion, make them all Hall of Famers. They will all go in when eligible. They'll all follow Marco Antonio Barrera into the Hall of Fame, and justifiably so. His trilogy with Eric Morales was staggering. I saw all three of those fights live at ringside, and while I didn't get to announce any of them, they were a joy as a fight fan to watch. And he had a brilliant career well beyond that. If that were the only thing that he was known for, it would be probably enough to practically put him in the Hall of Fame. But clearly he was an outstanding champion, one of the many great Mexican champions that have graced the ring. The next boxer that is being put in is someone I have as personal a connection with as I possibly could, and that is Johnny Tapia. Johnny started out his career fighting on ESPN, and the beginning of his career, we did many of his fights, and I broadcast many of them, got to know Johnny very, very well, and he was a very good fighter. Then his demons took over. He had a several-year period where life unraveled completely for him. He literally was on the street at one point, and just the idea that he could continue on with life was a question mark. Not only did he find a way to do that, but when he returned to the ring, something I've never, probably the most extraordinary thing I've seen in boxing, he literally was a better fighter than he was prior to losing those years to drug abuse and really nearly killing himself. Amazingly, somehow, he was better. And I was in Albuquerque when he won the world title, his first world title. It was one of the most emotional fights that I've seen or called. And the love that showered on him that night was staggering. As life went on, Johnny continued to have a phenomenal career, never completely shed himself of some of those demons, would ultimately pass way too early. But everyone that was touched by Johnny Tapia felt like they had met a good man. Yes, there was some self-destructive tendencies, but for other people, Johnny Tapia was a joy to be around and a true warrior in every sense of the word. For the folks outside the ring that are being put into the Hall of Fame, this particular induction means as much to me as the year that I was inducted into the Boxing Hall of Fame. And the reason for that is two of my very best friends in the whole world are being inducted. The first is Steve Farhood. Steve is, as you know, the announcer on our Showbox series on Showtime, but he's being inducted, and he's a terrific broadcaster, my favorite to listen to, and as an analyst, but he is so much more than that. Steve has been a boxing historian, a boxing writer, editor of several boxing magazines. He has dedicated his life to chronicling the sport of boxing, and nobody has done it in a fairer or more accurate fashion than Steve Farhood. So this honor to him comes for broadcasting, comes for writing, comes for being a historian. It comes for all those things. And Steve and I worked together for the first time way back in the early 1980s on a little show called Ringside Report, which was the beginning of his broadcasting career, when he came on and we would review fights that were held on our ESPN boxing series. And that was the start of Steve making a transition from writing also into broadcasting. He is the personality, the heart and soul, along with executive producer Gordon Hall, of the Showbox series on Showtime. Steve has imprinted that series with his personality, and it wears well on that show, because that show was about bringing these young boxers to the public's attention, and nobody could do it with the fairness or accuracy that Steve Farhood does. So I am thrilled and delighted that Steve has made it into the Hall of Fame. And just as delighted am I, as Yoda might say, to have Barry Tompkins be put into the Hall of Fame. Now, Barry and I worked together for 8 years on ESPN's boxing series. It was an absolute joyous period in my life. Barry is one of the most talented play-by-play men in all of sports. He's one of the most eclectic. He has literally done just about every sport imaginable. But the reason he's going into the Boxing Hall of Fame is that he was brilliant doing boxing at HBO, where he chronicled, among other things, the rise of Mike Tyson in his younger days as a heavyweight champion, and did it brilliantly. He did those fights with me on ESPN for 8 years. He did boxing on Fox Sportsnet for a long time with Rich Murata as his partner. And now he returns to boxing, has in the last several years, and is a teammate of mine at Showtime, where he does the Showbox series with Steve Farhood and Raul Marquez. Barry is the consummate pro. He's somebody who believes the event should speak for itself and he shouldn't override it. He and I share that that feeling, as does Steve Farhood, by the way. And his call of fights, to me, is what I like to hear. And he's also the greatest guy and a close friend. And I am delighted that he has made it into the Boxing Hall of Fame. Jimmy Lennon Jr. is our ring announcer on Showtime, and his father, Jimmy Lennon Sr., who was one of the preeminent ring announcers for many, many years, will be inducted this year into the Boxing Hall of Fame. Of course, this is an induction that has been delayed way too long. Jimmy Lennon Sr. should have been in the Hall of Fame a long time ago, but the positive outweighs the negative because he's going in. And I grew up as a young man watching Jimmy Lennon Sr., and he was spectacular. You know, he brought a grace and an ease to ring announcing that was a little different than what we had seen. And in fact, you know, it was kind of symbolic of him being from the West Coast. You know, he had been a big band singer earlier in his life, and so the voice came naturally. And of course, his son, Jimmy Lennon Jr., stepped into his footsteps, literally. And Jimmy Lennon Jr. is a member of the Hall of Fame as well. So thrilled to see Jimmy Lennon Sr. get into the Hall of Fame. Jerry Roth, a very, very distinguished judge in Nevada, who I've also known for many, many years and who has done an excellent job, will be inducted into the Hall of Fame. Jerry has done virtually every major fight you can imagine and has judged every major champion that you can possibly imagine. He's done a terrific job, and he deserves to go into the Hall of Fame as well. So this group of inductees, a very special group in my opinion, on every level. Certainly the boxers were all astonishing fighters, and all the other folks going in who have helped the sport outside the ring deserve to be going in as well. I'll be there front and center rooting all of them on June 8th through the 11th when they get inducted at Canastota.